Hello everybody, this is Gareth Cahoon Speaks back here with another video. I'd like you to hit the subscribe bar, give me a thumbs up if you like the video, or hit the notification bell to be notified when I post my next post. Or otherwise you could donate to my ministry and the charities that I support at garethcahoon3@gmail.com on PayPal. Israel at 78, from a declaration heard around the world to a nation still defining itself. May 14th, 1948 is considered the birthday of the modern state of Israel. On that day, as the British mandate officially expired, David Ben-Gurion stood in the Tel Aviv Museum Hall and read out the Jewish state's Declaration of Independence in a speech broadcast over the radio. It is often considered the date of the war for independence began as 5 nations, Egypt, Transjordan, Syria, Lebanon and Iraq, along with the Saudi Arabian contingent, invaded the newly declared state the following day. However, active fighting began between Jews and Arabs over territory actually started on the 29th of November 1947, one day after the adoption of the United Nations Resolution 181, the so-called Partition Plan. This resolution called for the dividing the territory of the British Mandate, which had already been split into mandatory Palestine and Transjordan, into 2 separate territories, one for the Jewish residents and another for the Arab residents. The plan was accepted by the Jewish representatives in mandatory Palestine, but rejected by all Arab leaders who were opposed to any Jewish sovereignty in the Middle East. Seeing the preparations for the British forces to leave the area, Arab militias made up of local Arabs and paramilitary groups from the surrounding territories began carrying out attacks on Jewish communities throughout the territory of mandatory Palestine, hoping to prevent the establishment of a Jewish state. These attacks caused by many historic Jewish communities in Gaza and Judea and Samaria to be abandoned as Arab militias attacked Jews living in those areas, often carrying out massacres to drive them. The attacks also strengthened armed Jewish defence and militia organisations such as the Haganah, Hebrew for defence, the Irgun, Hebrew for organisation, and the Lahomi Kerut, Israel Hebrew for fighters of the freedom of Israel. Haganah was the underground Jewish militia started in 1920 during the mandatory period to protect Jewish communities from Arab violence. The Irgun, an offshoot of Haganah, was founded by leaders who felt that the passive defence strategy was insufficient in the face of active organised Arab attacks on Jews and the unwillingness of the British authorities to stop such attacks. Lee was further offshoot of Irgun, which focused on convincing the British to leave the territory of mandatory Palestine, especially after the British imposed limits on Jewish immigration to the territory while refusing to impose limits on Arab migration. That was because the British needed oil and they didn't want to upset the Arabs who they were paying a heavy price for getting the oil off. These organisations acted as defensive and offensive militias working to counter Arab attacks on Jewish communities. Although they were mostly successful in defending the territory allowed for the Jewish settlement in the Partition Plan, even before Ben-Gurion's Declaration of Independence on May 14th, 1948, the Haganah decided to seize control of the territory allocated to a Jewish state under the Partition Plan. The fighting to establish the control largely took place between April 1st and May 14th. On May 15th, one day later, Egyptian airplanes attacked Tel Aviv, starting the official war for independence. Initially, the Arab states planned to assist the local Arab militias, but not to commit ground troops to the conflict. However, after hearing that Jordan's King Abdullah was planning to seize territory in the areas of Judea and Samaria abandoned by Jewish residents, Egypt's King Farouk ordered his armies to march on Tel Aviv. This led to a bloody war perpetuated by 2 ceasefires, which only ended in early 1949, when the Arab armies began to experience significant losses of territory after initially capturing much of the territory allocated for the Jewish state. One of the early Israeli successes was the recognition of the fledgling state of Israel by the US President Harry S. Truman. 11 minutes after Ben Gurion's declaration was read aloud, the US thus became the first nation to recognize Israel, lending early legitimacy to the Jewish state. While the US would attempt to maintain a neutral position for many years following the War of Independence, the increasing support given to the Arab states by the former Soviet Union eventually led the US to begin supporting Israel more openly in an attempt to prevent Soviet dominance in the region. The support gradually increased as Israel's repeated wars to push back Arab aggression often involved US weapons systems being pitted against Soviet weapons systems with great success. Israel's declaration of independence also led to one of the 20th century's most enduring conflicts, and as Arab nations largely refused to recognise or negotiate with the Jewish state. Despite the repeated Israeli military victories, that refusal was most clearly seen in the Arab League's Khartoum resolution following the 1967 Six-Day War. The resolution contained three famous no's: no peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, and no negotiations with Israel. The three no's became the cornerstone of Arab policy towards Israel until the 1978 Camp David Accords, which led to the signing of an official peace treaty by Egyptian President, who would later be assassinated over his pursuit of peace with Israel. It would take another 15 years before another Arab country, Jordan, under the leadership of King Hussein, signed a peace treaty with Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in October 1994. In September 2020, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Morocco and Sudan announced formal recognition of Israel, broadening the group of Arab and Muslim nations accepting the reality of Israel's declaration of independence 72 years earlier. In 2026, 78 years after boldly proclaiming the return of the Jewish people to their ancestral homeland, the Jewish state has found itself standing against aggression from the Iranian regime and with countries that opposed its creation. At the same time, the territorial division that sparked the War of Independence has yet to be resolved, while the internal debate over the identity of the Jewish state, which was never settled by a state constitution, continues to shape Israeli politics. And I just want to wish Israel and the Jewish people a happy Independence Day for May 14th. I was born on the 20th of May. Six days after the State of Israel was recognized in 1948. I was born in 1981, the year after the United Christian Embassy was formed. And I am part of the Christian Embassy in Jerusalem, and I always will stand with the Jewish people and their right for their eternal homeland to be reconstituted in the same land that they left when they were dispersed by God to the nations. Shalom, Maranatha, and Hallelujah, and happy Independence Day, Israel.